My friends, let's begin with a truth most people feel, but few dare to say out loud. When a system begins to fail, the leaders who rise from it begin to wobble. And today we are witnessing just that. The presidency of Donald Trump, once seen as a political earthquake, is now shaking under the very ground it created. But this is not simply about one man. This is about a system, an economy that promised greatness and delivered insecurity, anger, and division instead. When a system begins to crumble, it doesn't just break, it exposes everything it tried to hide. Crisis, my friends, is not destruction, it's revelation. It is the moment when illusions fall apart and truth walks in, uninvited but undeniable. When you see leaders panic, when institutions begin to shake, when the promises of endless prosperity start to sound hollow, that's not the end of stability. That's the beginning of clarity. Because crisis doesn't create weakness, it reveals it. And what we're witnessing today is the unveiling of decades of denial. The system didn't suddenly become corrupt or unjust, it always was. The difference now is that the mask is slipping and the truth can no longer be contained. For years, we were told that the economy was strong, that markets would fix everything, that wealth would trickle down, and that hard work was the ultimate key to success. But look around. Millions are working harder than ever and still falling behind. Wages are stagnant. Debt is rising and insecurity has become the new normal. The system promised freedom, but it sold dependency. It promised stability, but delivered chaos. It promised opportunity, but reserved it for the few. And when those in power tell you not to question it, that's when you know you must, because real change begins the moment you stop believing their version of reality. Now, here's the hook. The greatest power of crisis is not that it destroys comfort, but that it destroys illusion. It shows us who truly benefits from the system and who pays the price for it. It reveals the greed behind the smiles, the manipulation behind the markets, and the fear behind the politics. It's uncomfortable, yes, but necessary. Growth never comes from silence or blindness. It comes from seeing clearly, from facing the pain, and from deciding to never go back to sleep. You see, the moment you understand how deeply the game has been rigged against you, you stop playing by their rules, you start writing your own. Crisis, in that sense, is the most honest teacher we will ever have. It humbles the arrogant and awakens the unaware. It shakes you until you either wake up or give up, and the choice is always yours. When the world around you starts falling apart, you have two options: to cling desperately to what was or to rise boldly into what can be. Every time the system fails, it gives birth to something new, a new consciousness, a new demand for justice, a new generation of people who refuse to live in chains disguised as freedom. That's why I say do not fear the collapse of illusion. Embrace it. When something falls, it clears space for truth to stand. When the curtain burns, the light gets in. We've been conditioned to see crisis as a punishment, but in reality, it's an invitation to see, to think, and to act differently. It's an opportunity to rebuild, not from the top down, but from the ground up. And let me say this with conviction: no empire, no presidency, no corporation, no ideology can survive once people begin to see through its lies. The trouble they call instability is actually awakening. The loss of confidence they panic about is actually people reclaiming their voice. When ordinary workers start to understand that the problem isn't them, it's the structure that exploits them, the foundation begins to shake. That's when change becomes inevitable. So when you hear that the system is in trouble, don't despair. Listen closely. The sound you're hearing isn't collapse, it's transformation. It's the sound of awakening. It's the sound of people realizing they deserve more than survival. Every crisis carries within it the blueprint of renewal. And those who dare to see through the smoke of illusion will be the ones who build the world that comes after. Because truth once revealed cannot be unseen. And that, my friends, is the beginning of real power. Real power has never belonged to the few at the top. It has always lived quietly, steadily, and sometimes unknowingly in the hands of ordinary people. The workers who keep the engines running, The teachers who shape minds, the builders who raise cities, the caregivers who sustain life, they are the true architects of every society. Yet, for generations, we have been taught to believe the opposite. We've been told that leaders, corporations, and politicians are the ones who move the world forward, that without them chaos would reign. But that, my friends, is the grand illusion of power, the belief that you are powerless. The real hook is this: the moment you realize that your collective action can stop the machine, you begin to see your worth. The powerful fear that day more than anything, because what keeps this system alive isn't their control, it's our consent. They depend on our labor, our silence, our obedience, and our belief that they are necessary. Once that belief cracks, everything changes. The workers who stop believing they are replaceable become the force that reshapes nations. Power does not flow downward, it rises upward when people stand together. Look at every major shift in history: civil rights, labor rights, women's rights. None of these began with elites. They began with ordinary people who had enough, people who looked at their conditions and said, no more. Real power has never been about titles or wealth. It's about numbers, unity, and courage. When individuals stand alone, they can be silenced. When they unite, they become history's loudest voice. That's why the system works so hard to divide you, through race, through class, through ideology, because divided people argue, united people act. And this is where the awakening must happen. We need to stop asking for permission to live with dignity. We need to stop waiting for saviors, for presidents, for strong leaders to fix what was designed to exploit us. The truth is, no leader can empower you more than the realization that you were the power all along. The world changes not when someone at the top makes a decision, it changes when millions at the bottom make a choice. The choice to say no, the choice to organize, the choice to build something fairer. The people at the top know this. That's why they spend billions on media, propaganda, and distraction to convince you that you're weak, that you don't matter, that your voice is small. They need you busy surviving so you never start thriving. They need you tired, in debt, afraid of losing what little you have, because fear keeps you obedient. But imagine for a moment, if that fear turned into understanding. Imagine if workers across every industry realized that they share the same struggle. Imagine if teachers, drivers, farmers, and nurses understood that their collective voice could reshape policy, economy, and history itself. That's when the system trembles. And here's the deeper truth: the people who rule over us have no power except the power we give them. The richest corporations on earth would vanish tomorrow if workers simply refused to labor under injustice. The most powerful politicians would crumble if citizens stopped accepting lies as truth. The system survives because people believe it's unshakable. But the moment you start believing in yourselves more than in them, everything turns upside down. That realization is the birth of real democracy, the kind that cannot be bought or sold. Never forget, every empire that ever fell began the moment its people stopped believing in its myths. And right now, people are waking up across the world. They're beginning to understand that their voice, multiplied by millions, carries more force than any army, more weight than any speech, and more power than any dollar. The power of the people is not a metaphor, it's a reality waiting to be used. So when you feel small, remember this: you are part of the greatest energy on this planet, the collective will of humanity. And when that will turns toward justice, fairness, and cooperation, no system built on greed can stand in its way. You are not powerless, you are the source of power itself. And the moment you truly believe that, the world you live in will never be the same again. We live in a world that trains us to wait. Wait for better leaders, wait for better policies, wait for the economy to fix itself, wait for someone to come and make it all right. From childhood, we are conditioned to look upward for direction and downward in doubt. But here's the truth that shakes the foundation of every unjust system: no one is coming to save you. The system won't save you. The politicians won't save you. The corporations won't save you, because they were never built to. The same structure that keeps you struggling is designed to make you believe you need it. The greatest illusion of power is dependence. The moment you break free from it, you begin to see how strong you really are. Here's the hook: the system needs you more than you need it. It thrives because you play your part, not because it deserves your trust. It depends on your effort, your labor, your belief, and your silence. The day you stop believing that your value comes from their approval, you start to reclaim your life. Power is not something they give, it's something you take back when you realize it was yours all along. Every great transformation in history began when ordinary people stopped waiting for rescue and started becoming the rescuers themselves. Think about it. Every time a worker demands fair pay, every time a student questions the system, every time a citizen challenges injustice, that's someone refusing to be saved and choosing to act. That's what change looks like. The most dangerous person in any corrupt system isn't the one who complains, it's the one who starts thinking independently, the one who stops consuming their propaganda and starts creating their own purpose. Because once you see how deeply they've programmed you to doubt your own strength, you start to unlearn fear. And that's when you become unstoppable. They want you distracted by comparison, by entertainment, by artificial success stories, because a focused mind is a threat. They want you exhausted from overwork, too tired to question, too busy to rebel. They sell you the fantasy that one day, if you're lucky, you'll make it. But make it where? Into a system built on exploitation, into a hierarchy that rewards a few and drains the rest. That's not success, that's surrender. Real success is reclaiming your agency, your dignity, your ability to define your life without permission from those who profit off your obedience. You don't need to burn down the world to change it. You only need to stop feeding what oppresses you. Stop believing that you are powerless. Stop waiting for the approval of those who built their wealth on your labor. Every act of awareness, every small stand, every refusal to participate in exploitation is a spark of revolution. Because change doesn't always begin with noise. Sometimes it begins in silence when one person decides to wake up. The system has convinced you that your voice doesn't matter. But look at history. Every empire has fallen because people realized it did. The same energy that built this economy can rebuild it differently. The same hands that construct wealth for others can construct justice for themselves. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. The truth becomes like fire. It burns away illusion and lights up the path forward. So stop waiting for saviors and start becoming one for yourself, your family, your community. Teach others that their power isn't given by systems, but awakened by courage. When you take responsibility for your life, not in fear, but in clarity, you become the kind of person no system can control. Because the greatest act of rebellion in a world built on control is to believe in yourself completely. You are not here to be saved. You are here to rise. You are here to think, to act, to create, and to challenge. The system fears that moment more than anything, because once the people stop waiting and start building, the walls begin to crack, and no force on earth can hold them back. The real revolution begins not with a crowd, but with one realization: you were never powerless. Failure is one of life's greatest disguises. It enters our world looking like defeat, humiliation, and loss, but hidden inside it is the seed of transformation. Every collapse, every disappointment, every so-called downfall carries a message that the comfortable rarely hear. What you thought was the end is often the beginning. History is built on the ruins of failure. Every empire that fell, every movement that stumbled, every individual who broke down, all of them became the soil from which something new was born. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it is the foundation of it. Yet society has taught us to fear it, to hide from it, to treat it as shame. But the truth is, those who dare to fail deeply are the only ones who ever rise beyond the ordinary. Here's the hook: failure doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. It strips away illusion, comfort, and complacency until only what's real remains. When the easy path collapses, you discover the strength you didn't know you had. When the applause fades, you find out who you are without validation. That's why failure is sacred. It's the moment when all the noise stops and you come face to face with your true self. It doesn't come to punish you, it comes to prepare you. The person you are after failure is sharper, humbler, and far more dangerous to mediocrity than the person you were before it. In every great transformation, whether political, personal, or social, failure has always been the catalyst. Trump's presidency being in serious trouble, for instance, isn't just a political crisis, it's a mirror showing the failure of an entire system built on illusion and inequality. But within that failure lies a spark, a moment for people to wake up, to realize that no false promise lasts forever. When an old structure breaks, the light of truth gets in. That is the power of failure. It forces a reckoning, a choice to rebuild the same way or rise differently. Those who choose the latter become the architects of a new order. You must understand comfort breeds stagnation, but failure breeds evolution. The most powerful movements in history were born from defeat. The workers' movements rose from exploitation, civil rights from oppression, revolutions from despair. Every injustice that seemed unbreakable eventually fell because people refused to let failure silence them. They transformed pain into purpose and purpose into progress. The same rule applies to your own life. When things fall apart, it's not a signal to retreat. It's a call to rebuild yourself stronger, wiser, and more focused than ever before. The greatest trick society plays is convincing you that failure defines your worth. It doesn't. What defines you is how you respond to it. When you fall, the world watches not to see your fall, but to see whether you rise. Do you surrender to defeat, or do you learn, adapt, and move forward? That decision determines everything. Failure is a test, a brutal, honest one, but it's also a gift that no comfort zone can give. Because through failure, you develop something no success story ever teaches: resilience. The system fears failure because it exposes weakness. Politicians, corporations, and leaders hide their failures because they know exposure means accountability. But individuals who embrace failure, who learn from it, become unbreakable. They stop living in fear of falling because they understand that falling isn't fatal, it's formative. Once you realize that every failure you've endured has been shaping you into someone stronger, you start to see failure as your ally, not your enemy. Look at your life. Every moment you thought was unbearable, every door that closed, every betrayal that broke you, it all brought you here. You didn't just survive, you evolved. That's what failure does. It clears away illusion and leaves only the truth. And the truth is, you are far more powerful than the world ever wanted you to believe. The system thrives on people who fear failure because fear keeps them obedient. But those who no longer fear it cannot be controlled. They become the builders of new realities. So when failure comes, and it will, welcome it. Look it in the eye and say, I see what you are. Don't hide, don't crumble, don't surrender. Let it shape you, let it teach you, let it burn away everything false, because the same fire that destroys also forges. Every revolution, every rebirth, every personal awakening begins in the ashes of failure. What looks like the end is often just the moment before you rise higher than you ever imagined. Stop waiting for the system to change for you. Build something so powerful that the system has no choice but to follow. The greatest mistake people make is believing that transformation begins with permission. It doesn't. It begins with creation. Every great movement in human history started not because the powerful decided to be kind, but because ordinary people decided to act. When workers refused to be silent, when thinkers refused to be censored, when dreamers refused to wait, entire empires shifted. The same principle applies to your own life. Change is not granted, it is built. Freedom is not a gift, it is crafted with persistence, vision, and unity. Here's the hook: the system is not broken by protest alone, it is replaced by creation. You cannot reform greed, but you can outgrow it. You cannot beg for fairness, but you can construct it. You cannot demand justice from those who profit off injustice. You must build justice with your own hands. That is the essence of human progress. Every invention, every institution of hope, every act of rebellion was built by those who stopped asking and started doing. The future doesn't belong to those who wait for approval, it belongs to those who create alternatives. Look around you. The structures that exist today, the corporations, the governments, the hierarchies, were all built by people no smarter than you. They simply believed they could shape the world, and so they did. The tragedy is that their creations began to rule the creators, but that can change the moment you remember that you too can build. When workers begin to own their workplaces, when communities begin to share resources, when people start organizing for common good rather than private gain, that's when real democracy begins. You see, the power to build is the purest form of freedom. No system can truly control those who create. The powerful want you to believe that building is beyond your reach. They tell you it's too complicated. You need experts. You need investors. You need permission. They say this because they know the day people stop believing that lie, the walls start to crack. They thrive on your dependency, not your creativity. But once you realize that progress begins with small, united actions, a cooperative here, a shared vision there, you start to see how change really happens. Revolutions don't start with explosions, they start with decisions. The decision to act, to organize, to build something better than what exists. The people who build instead of beg change history. They don't waste energy fighting over who's to blame. They focus on what can be created. They see the failures of the old world as raw material for the new one. That's how true transformation works, not by tearing down, but by building up with purpose. When you choose to build, you stop being a victim of the system and become the author of the next chapter. That shift in mindset from pleading to producing is the spark that ignites every great movement. And this isn't just about economics or politics, it's about life itself. If your environment is toxic, build a better one. If your workplace exploits you, create one that empowers others. If your society rewards greed, construct communities that reward kindness. When you build, you not only change your circumstances, you change consciousness. You prove that another way is possible, that humanity still has imagination left. That's what the system fears most: people who stop waiting and start creating. Every builder begins with doubt. Every dream starts as a whisper the world laughs at, but those whispers, repeated, organized, and acted upon, become thunder. That's how every revolution starts, with a handful of people brave enough to say, we can make it ourselves. So when they tell you to wait, to obey, to be patient, remember patience has never built a better world. Courage has. The truth is, the system only exists because we keep feeding it. The day we choose to build outside it, to invest our minds, our labor, and our love in something new, it begins to fade. That is the real revolution, not destruction, but creation, the act of saying, we will no longer beg for a seat at their table, we will build our own. That's where power lies, not in protest, but in production, not in begging, but in building. Because the world that's coming won't be handed down. It will be built from the ground up by those who dared to create when others only complained. So yes, Trump's presidency is in serious trouble. But let's be clear, this trouble is also an opportunity, because every collapse of a false promise opens the door to a new beginning. If we, the people, learn from this, if we understand that our power lies not in waiting for saviors, but in building solidarity, then this moment of crisis can become a moment of transformation.